Psychological warfare aims to demoralize the enemy. This applies to both soldiers and civilians. Demoralization is aimed at making the enemy stop resisting. Psychological warfare is conducted both before and during an armed conflict. For example, in 480 BC, Xerxes I spread rumors about the large number of his army, saying that, if all Persian soldiers shot from bows, the arrows would outshine the sun. The Cold War is not a direct armed clash, but a global geopolitical, military, technological, economic and ideological confrontation on a world scale. From 1946 to 1991, the Cold War between the US and the USSR was about overtaking each other in scientific and technological progress, military power, economic and ideological aspects. It was not an official military clash, but nevertheless, because the confrontation required involvement and influence in various parts of the planet, there were frequent outbreaks of armed conflict in various parts of the Third World. It is a conflict between states that have nuclear weapons. A war in which a huge number of civilians die because nuclear and thermonuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction. Nuclear war could have started as a result of the Cold War between the USA and the USSR. Information warfare is a strategy to use information as a weapon to achieve political, economic, military, or other objectives. In this strategy, information is used to influence the enemy's population, government, and military forces, and to defend one's own side against similar influences. Blitzkrieg, which translates from German as lightning war, is designed to conduct a rapid maneuver war, to achieve victory in days, weeks, or months, with the expectation that the enemy simply does not have time to mobilize and prepare the main military force and economy. Modern battle tactics are based on independent actions of large tank groups, with the help of aviation, the second disable enemy air defense systems and aircraft, to prevent them from interfering with the tank groups to advance. Also, an important part of this cauldrons, in which take the enemy, and then gradually destroy them. Civil war is a war caused by the accumulated social contradictions within the state. It is a struggle of organized groups that seek to seize power in the region or want to change state policy. One of the parties to the conflict is not always the state itself. In maneuver warfare, there is no stable front line, but rather large-scale maneuver actions depending on the situation. This style of warfare can be used by one or both sides of the conflict. Waged such a war can be as all the time of the conflict and at certain stages. It implies such warfare bypassing opponents from the flanks in order to cut them off from the main troops and force them to lay down their arms. It is a war waged by armed groups that hide among the population or take advantage of the terrain, done by a large part of the population against an authority they consider alien or occupying. The tactic of guerrilla warfare is to avoid direct conflict with the enemy. Instead, there are four aspects of guerrilla warfare. First, they destroy infrastructure, such as railroad tracks to limit the delivery of supplies, destroying communication towers, poisoning water pipes. Second, information warfare, which involves spreading false information to sway the local population to their side. Third, destroying enemy forces in small numbers. Fourth, terrorizing the enemy and collaborators. Total war uses all possible methods and resources of all countries involved in the conflict to defeat the enemy. Such wars began to be singled out as a separate category by the end of the 19th century, with the emergence of the Geneva Conventions. And such wars have existed since the beginning of mankind. Total war also implies total mobilization of the population. Asymmetric warfare is warfare in which both sides of a conflict differ significantly in military power from each other. Most often, the weaker side of the conflict differs greatly from the stronger one, in that it has fewer people, equipment, influence, and resources to wage war. But despite this, although in most cases the weaker side loses such wars, there are cases when the weaker side finds a vulnerable place of the enemy. The main features of such wars are unpredictability of the outcome, the strategy of searching for weaknesses of the strong, the use of prohibited military actions by the weak side, indirect military actions on the part of the weak side, the inability of the strong side to defend its position and reliably suppress the weak. Examples of such wars: the First Chechen War, the Iraq War, the Second Lebanon War. The essence of a war of attrition is to reduce one's own losses and force the enemy to exhaust his own resources in order to gain an advantage. This is done by constant attack or threat, which causes the enemy to suffer constant material and human losses that eventually leads to a state of inability to give the necessary resistance. If weapons and tactics are equal, the side with greater reserves and resources has a better chance of victory. A proxy war is a war in which an armed conflict between two countries is fought in a third country using its resources. This helps to avoid a direct clash, reducing the risk of a full-scale war, while having a significant impact on the third country and its internal affairs. Examples of proxy wars include the Korean War and the Vietnam War, where the superpowers used local forces to fight. A war of succession usually involved several states competing for a throne that was left without an heir, in which it was assumed that if they placed their protege on the vacant throne, there would be changes in their foreign policy and sometimes internal concessions. This was common in New Age Europe. Examples: War of the English Succession, 1688–97. War of the Polish Succession, 1733–35. War of the Austrian Succession, 1740–48. Small warfare is the action of small groups whose purpose is to harm the enemy, namely to wear down the enemy, interrupt food supplies, damage means of communication, and so on. In general terms, the objective of small warfare is to create favorable conditions for the main troops and give them an advantage in major battles. Because of small wars, the enemy is in constant tension. In the case of fighting against a stronger enemy, small warfare turns into guerrilla warfare. A war at sea is any armed conflict in which the navies of two different states are involved. The essence of such a war is the struggle for supremacy at sea, which also includes military actions on rivers, lakes, and artificial reservoirs. According to the laws and customs of naval warfare, naval operations may be carried out only by the naval forces of the belligerent states, and only within the theater of naval warfare, which include high seas, territorial and internal waters of the belligerent states, airspace above them. Positional or trench warfare is fought in relatively stable positions and has a stable front line. Troops build trenches, bunkers, and other fortifications to defend against attacks. Artillery fire plays a key role, damaging enemy fortifications and positions. Positional warfare can last a long time, sometimes years, with regular and often fruitless attacks and counterattacks. The strategy is often aimed at depleting the enemy's resources and morale, rather than a quick breakthrough and victory. Echelon warfare was a Soviet term for fighting along railroad lines. In such warfare, armored trains and blinded trains, provided with wood and sandboards and detachable armament, were used. Success in echelon warfare was determined by the power of the armored train's artillery and machine gun armament, not by the quality or thickness of the armor. Also, the fearlessness of the crews, their ability to wield weapons, and their knowledge of battle tactics on railroad lines played a key role. Land warfare involves complex tactics where maneuverability, logistics, and coordination between different branches of the military are key elements. Effective land operations often depend on the ability to move troops and equipment rapidly, using mechanized and motorized units to achieve operational depth and encircle the enemy. An important aspect is the integration of intelligence and information, enabling commanders to make informed decisions in real time. The People's War involves ordinary citizens in addition to the military. Such a war has never been waged for offensive purposes, only for the defense of one's own territory. Such a war is possible only if the cause for which the state is fighting is such that it is supported by a large part of society. Also, circumstances contributing to the People's War is the psychological state of the people and the terrain on which the war is waged. Distinctive features of the People's War are the extremely bloody and exterminating nature of all clashes, as well as the duration and persistence of hostilities. The struggle is for every inch of land, and it is unthinkable to end the campaign with a single blow.